So here we go. We're on, what is this? FrankenRooger Part 4. Final assembly. You probably saw the still picture YouTube video of us fixing the barrel droop from this. Now, although this Feddersen isn't the barrel that was in it, it was still as sloppy in here as the other barrel that was in. And literally when it was in, you could move it up, down, left, right. You could spin it in there, take it right out, stick it right in. There was no resistance to putting that in at all. Just loose in there. And we learned over time that, there just was too much of a barrel droop in this. Lost 5, 6, and 8 mils off the scope because of that. So in the other one, what we did, just to recap real quick, went to AutoZone, paid a couple bucks for some feeler gauges, which you would have seen in the other video. I'll link the two. Found one that fit really snugly in here. You can maybe see the evidence of that part of that feeler gauge right there. I think we used a 0.0179 and then cut the piece to go in there, and then as we slid the barrel in, put the feeler gauge in, slid it down, pushed it down in there, so it took up the gap between this mounting block for the V block and the barrel itself, and it fit very snugly in there, seated very well. It seemed to be very flush all the way around. There was no movement at the time, so I decided to put the tandem cross V block in, ran that down to I think 15 inch-pounds. I know it's usually 10 to 12, 10 to 14. I ran it to 15 because on the fix-it sticks, that was the easiest one to actually find a whole number on. So this is all together. So now what we're going to do is start putting together everything we saw, all the bits and pieces from the other night, which includes the pegboard tandem cross, skeletonized charging handle, the crossfire bolt. That'll be going in there. And I guess we'll just do that right away. Not a good camera angle to be working on a bolt here. Get it? I get it. This is not a professional production. This is how we used to work on guns and send the videos back and forth each other to my uncle and I. Found it easier to put it on YouTube than to try to send it via email, simply because the size of the videos were too much. Again, we're going to compress the spring back as far as we can. Then we're going to drop the bolt in, and hopefully I can drop it just at the right point so that, look at that, first shot in there. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to put in the, this is a bumper from Kid. I had an extra one from the Kid bolt I got before. Basically rubber to give you a nice soft bump, but also a steel core to give you some rigidity and durability against the constant impact. That went in nice and slick, and then what we do is we put the metal core right through the center of that. Now we've got our bolt put together. All right, bolt is installed. Skeletonized handle, tandem cross bolt, 50 MOA MDT rail with the Feddersen 16 1/4 inch non-threaded barrel. Next, we're going to put in the trigger pack. You saw me tear this apart the other day. We discussed about polishing specific areas. Not sure if I'm allowed to show polishing video on YouTube or altering or doing anything with the trigger, so I put it back together. We'll do some additional testing on the trigger pull once it's all mounted in the stock. We did some in the vise last night. This was it bounced just below 6 to just over 6 pounds before we worked on it. I polished everything up extremely well. Not quite a mirror polish, but it's quite shiny comparatively to what it did look like. And then put a Kid 1 3/4 pound trigger return spring in the back here. Doesn't matter how much you polish and get things ready within the kit itself. If you're still pushing against a 3-pound trigger, you're still pushing 3 pounds. So it works quite well. The only other thing I'll probably change in this is the bolt release or the mag release. It's a little irritating to try to get to quickly. There's some T-handled ones. Maybe I'll make it red to match this. I'm not exactly sure yet, but it's going to stay the way it is for now. And maybe the only other thing would be the tandem cross bolt hold open, which has a much larger spot to grab onto that. However, did do the mod on this to make this a auto bolt release, so you don't have to worry about pushing the little metal piece here to get the bolt to drop back in. So we're going to pop this into place, and in this we're using tandem cross pins. The nice thing about these, if you've done 1022 work in the past, you know 90% of the time you're going to be chasing pins across the tabletop or across the floor. These have a little ball bearing spring-loaded detent in there to keep them from just falling out. They are quite nice. If you've chased pins repeatedly and not found some, well, you know that it's probably cheaper to buy this once than to buy a bunch of those. So here's the stock. What comes with it is this tailpiece that goes in here, aluminum. And this actually, when you put this, if you're familiar with most stocks, when you insert your right barreled action into any stock, there's some kind of a ledge that this is going to grip onto. The nice thing about the Titan stock with the this in it as well, you can see it mounts up quite flush, really nice fitting there. In this, it also comes with a little grub screw I think I talked about before, which you can run up in there. So if you put this in the chassis and there's still any play, you can run this little grub screw up and adjust it. It comes out the other end here, this hole on this end, and it has a brass tip on. You can actually take up any play by turning that up in there and make it fit more snugly when you run it into your stock. But we've removed this because not only have I harvested this off of another 22, we've harvested the Victor Titan spike anchor part off of that as well. Now what this does is has this hardened steel grub screw with a spike on it. And this goes into this piece in the back. And this will be inserted into the stock, and we'll talk about and do that here shortly once I get this started back in. And you can see, we'll turn this in, and you'll eventually see that grub screw come out on the other side. There you go. You can see the grub screw. I'm going to pull it back in. The grub screw, once this is inserted into here, when you're inserting this into your stock and this is married up, that grub screw turned in creates this nice little silver dent here. And what that is doing is it's pushing the receiver in and downward. So you have 2 points of attachment on this, the action screw in the front and the grub screw in the back. Homemade hole here. That hole I drilled in myself, so you can actually run your cleaning rod straight through the back once you have the bolt out, of course, straight to the back and clean your barrel, better protecting the crown on that, especially if you have a target crown. So if you don't, somebody said on another video or somewhere else, if you don't like a little dent in there, then don't use this, but I found it increases accuracy very much when I swap those out. So this actually gets inserted into this section back here, and it's pretty tight fitting. So I think the instructions even advise you to wear gloves so you don't cut your hand, because the edges can be very sharp. But we want to make sure this gets, you get it started here, then I'll bring it back down on the camera. Get it started back in here. We're going to push it back inside. We're going to lock that into place. Eventually get it in there. You might have to wiggle it back and forth a little bit. And then once it's seated, it's your rear attachment point. Actually, that what looks like a wild cherry anodized aluminum looks really good with that stock. Then underneath there's a screw hole here, and you're going to take the accompanying screw, and we're going to turn that down in there. Make sure the hole's lined up. This is a 3 millimeter screw head, so we're going to get that. We're going to turn this in. So although the piece that comes with it, with that little grub screw, will give you a great solid attachment point. That's a complaint a lot of people have between, you know, the Ruger stock and some other ones, is if you were to push down in the rear of the receiver, you can still get some movement. And with this, that's not going to happen. With the black one here, with the grub screw, you can take up any slack in there that gives you any movement. But on this one, we're going to actually use the grub screw to push that down in there and defeat any movement at all. And it did increase the accuracy of my groups, especially at distance. We're going to just turn this into about 20 pounds on the fix-it stick here, and there we are at about 20 pounds. Okay. Now we're ready to put the stock into the barrel action into the stock. Going to make sure that these go together and catch that slot back there. Also, make sure your safety is centered equally on both sides, so we can get this to pass through the sides of the stock itself. We're going to slide that right back into there, and now we're in. Going to flip this over, and we're going to actually start putting in our action screw. And that should be, what, a 5/32. Let's get this started. Actually, that is not correct. We're going to snug that up just a little bit. We're not going to torque it yet, because on the directions we're going to get that snug. And then we're going to come back here and we're going to turn in the grub screw, the spike anchor in the back. All we're going to do is we're going to turn it. It's going to move relatively freely. We're going to turn it just till it touches the receiver, and you can feel the resistance start. Then what they tell you is to start, just take 1/2 turn. You can do more. You can actually, this is one of those you can adjust as you go along if you want to test out accuracy with your torque settings on your action screw in the front. I've gone to the point where I've turned it twice, 2 half turns or 1 full turn. Then I'll come back to the front and I will make sure that the action screw in the front is torqued into at least 20 pounds, 20 inch-pounds. Let me turn it around here so I can see it. There is about 20 inch-pounds front and back. So there you have it. The video with all the parts and pieces all put together. Other than birthday present stock and barrel, everything else is scavenged out of bits and bobbles and boxes and bags that we showed you the other day. The scope will be on this tomorrow. Yeah, maybe tomorrow evening. And we'll talk about that when it gets here, and mount that onto this, and then get it out to the range. So cool. Don't throw anything away. You might be a 1022 pack rat, but you never know when these things are going to come in handy in the future. If you're trying to do a budget build or you need to fix something simple, hey, you just might have that piece laying around. So we'll do some more trigger testing on this now that it's mounted in the gun and see what kind of pull we get. But we'll chat with you again in the future. Have a good evening.